Yo, what's up? My name is Trey Little, and I am a rapper based out of Detroit, Michigan. And I travel and make music for a living while staying home with my son. So often I get the question when I travel, is Detroit safe? So I figured, why not make a video about it? So stick around after the intro, and I'm gonna get into it. Let's do it.
I don't never quit. I don't never quit. I don't never quit. I don't never quit. My cup it overflow. I'm about to take a sip. About to hit the beat and then let it rip. I don't never.
So when people ask me, is Detroit safe? Sometimes my reaction is like, what you mean? Like, what kind of question is that? But then as I traveled, I often started to see that some people see the news and they see the media and they see some of the hip hop music coming out of Detroit and they say, yo, that place looks like a war zone, a dead zone. There's videographers on YouTube or guys who create videos of just the ruins of Detroit, and people see that. And people often ask, man, like, what about the wars? What about the race riots in the 60s? And a lot of the stuff I didn't know about until I started talking to people and talking to my pastor and really researching the history. And I was seeing like, wow, Detroit was rough. So me personally, I grew up in the era of the war on drugs, meaning that drugs were imported into inner city communities for the destruction of it, and also guns. So I grew up as a product of that. So for me, Detroit was rough. It was like a war, rival neighborhoods. There wasn't gangs, but I grew up on Dexter. And then Dexter was like at war with a neighborhood, you know, maybe like Zone 8 or something like that. And then there would be war and people killing each other over territory and money and guns. And I lost my dad because of that, and you know, my whole family was into that. So as I got older, I started to have a normal childhood, but then I started to see that I was in a war, and I started to see that Detroit really wasn't safe for a young black man, or at least in my perspective, like I was a target of other young black people. Also, I was around nothing but complete poverty and desolation. So it was the factories had collapsed, the automotive industry, and selling drugs and crime was the only way to make money. So when you have depravity anywhere with a small group of people, you will notice that crime rate goes up and elevates. So that was my life. And then my mom moved us to the suburbs of Detroit on government assistance, and I was in the suburbs. So that was my life in a big chapter of being out of Detroit. And then this is when everything changed for me. When I met my wife, and when I went on like my spiritual journey of discovering my purpose apart from the streets, and going on this journey of finding God and his purpose and plan for my life, and with the music that I was doing. So when I came back to Detroit, I was gone for maybe like 6 years, and then when I came back, I started seeing all the coffee shops, and then I started seeing the ballparks, and I started seeing all this renovation and all these luxury lofts, because at the time I was so young in Detroit that I wasn't really driving around. I just stayed in my neighborhood and rode bikes, and I moved out of Detroit when I was 15. So coming back with a license, an adult that made money, I was able to go around and actually see the new Detroit. So then you had this thing that was introduced to me called gentrification, where a lot of white people started moving back in, and then developers started developing things, and the prices started to go up. And then a lot of the black people in certain neighborhoods were being forced to move out because they couldn't afford certain neighborhoods or afford to live in certain houses. So for me, I started to kind of like, I didn't know this was a bad thing because I just didn't really think about it, because I benefited because I knew a lot of the developers, and I had this, I still do have a name as an artist. So I was benefiting because I had the money to buy these things and take place in certain things. So Detroit, like certain areas, Midtown, Downtown, Corktown, West Village are really safe. Indian Village, Boston Edison, really wealthy. Like you can be in there, they have like private security, private policing, and you will never have to worry about anything. Nice coffee shops, 5-star restaurants, hotels, and this is where like if anybody argue or look at you wrong, the police and security shut that person down quick. There's also a private school in Detroit, Waldorf School, and it's like really expensive. So a lot of the people who move in Detroit from these like wealthy neighborhoods like Bloomfield, or I meet a lot of people in West Village from the UK. And there's certain neighborhoods in Detroit where I'm a minority, but most of the people are my friends in these neighborhoods. So for me, it's a little different. But then also you have the same neighborhoods that I grew up in, like the Dexters, the Linwoods, the 7 Mile, 6 Mile, the 7 Mile Blood Gang. You still got, you know, the East Side, West Side, like you got a lot of the trenches of Detroit. But the thing about that is a lot of those neighborhoods are abandoned because a lot of people that I know either are dead or in jail, or they moved out or moved out of town, because back then there was this thing preventing black people to move out of Detroit. It was, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a specific name. So black people couldn't move in the suburbs of Detroit in certain areas because they were prevented by like real estate to being able to move out. So now that they're able to move out, a lot of these neighborhoods are abandoned, or a lot of them, like I said, are either unfortunately dead or in jail. From my experience, a lot of my friends. So a lot of these neighborhoods are still rough. It's still the trenches. People still get killed, but it's not as populated like it was when I grew up. So even when I grew up, certain neighborhoods were nice to me, where I had all my family, all my friends, but the rival neighborhoods were considered to be dangerous. So my neighborhood was dangerous, but for me as a kid, it wasn't dangerous because all of the people who were doing all the crime were like protecting me, you know, and my family. So you still have that, but the upper class and middle class neighborhoods usually stay to themselves, and the hood usually stay to themselves. They never usually cross paths. The people who are wealthy in Detroit don't really go to the rough neighborhoods, and then the people from the rough neighborhoods don't really go to the wealthy or middle class neighborhoods. So I do believe that's a problem, because I think in immersing each other, though it's not going to be perfect, there's going to be some things that happen, but it will break the segregation, because Chicago went through the same thing. But the answer is Detroit is just as safe as any other neighborhood, any other city, and any other state. And I travel a lot, so I would know these things. You can live in Detroit and be super wealthy. Like if you're a millionaire, there's accommodations for you in Detroit, you know. But the issue with that is a lot of the millionaires that come here, they stay with their own kind and they stay with their own people, and it doesn't really help the people here, so it creates this division. But at the end of the day, I would say as someone like me who travels a lot, who's starting to make more money, I feel like I'm a bridge, because I'm friends with a lot of the wealthy people who move into Detroit, but I also got respect in the hood. So my goal is to share my story, to bring understanding and help bridge that gap, help people in need, and also help the people have understanding and move in. So you can answer that yourself. I would say Detroit is just as safe as any other place I've been to, Colorado, California, and stuff like that. But it's all up to you on what you want to do with your life. So thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and comment, and let's talk about it in the comments. Peace.
Who can I go to? Where can I go to? When all these things in my mind, I'm just trying to get by, and I'm just trying to wonder why, I doubt myself on a daily. Voices in my head drive me crazy. Always scared for someone to say something that'll set me off. Lost in my emotions. Hope and counseling can help me keep coping. I'm feeling sick, anxiety.